Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for joining us on the HelloPrenup podcast. We are so excited to chat with you today. First and foremost, I would love to know how you got started in the corporate world in finance.
Oh, yeah. So I spent about a decade working in finance, and how I ended up there was despite being a little performer as a kid, I was really good at business and maths. And as the youngest of three girls, my dad kind of told me that I was the one who was going to go get a real job and be his pension plan. So I took it upon myself, whether he was joking or not, to go out and get a real job, make some good money. And where I thought that would happen would be in corporate finance. I figured that would probably be the place that I could go and make some good money for myself. I came from Southern Ireland. We had a very nice upbringing, but nothing super lavish. And I think since just being a young girl, I always had this desire to have my own money and see more of the world and explore more, which led me to work with a few of the big four companies and start out as a forensic accountant. I became a chartered accountant. I spent about a decade building a very exciting career in finance. And yes, I say exciting because it puts most people to sleep, but I manifested the dream career that I had always envisioned when I first walked through the doors of university. And I was traveling the world. I was working with the most brilliant minds and flying first class and staying at fabulous hotels and just working on the most exciting finance projects. And yeah, it was really just the manifestation of everything, as I said, I once dreamed of.
Good for you. And that's hilarious about your dad. No pressure. But I love that it actually worked out for you. And the fact that you actually like grabbed by the horns, you're like, yes, I actually want to do this, I think is amazing. And then you over delivered. That's incredible. What kind of projects did you work on when you were in the corporate finance world?
So towards the end of my career, about the last 5 years, I was working in financial restructuring. So what that was working with these multi-million dollar companies who had taken on a massive amount of debt and were really struggling. So for example, I was working within the oil and gas and the shipping industry when oil prices kind of bottomed out quite a bit. And so a lot of those companies were facing a lot of challenges. So I went on the board of several companies and was working with them, restructuring their whole financial operation so that they could come out the other side, that their shareholders wouldn't lose all their value, and that we could actually have a successful business continuing to move forward, which was pretty cool because it meant that, one of the kind of last engagements I worked on, I was on the board of the company. They were headquartered out in Dubai. We also had ships out in Indonesia. We had our board meetings in Paris. So it was a very fun time traveling around, working on this very exciting project as there was so much craziness happening. We had ships out in Nigeria as well. So there was a trip out there and just all the chaos and excitement that goes with restructuring quite a multinational company and all the different cultural differences that come into play with that as well.
Gosh, good for you. I'm having travel FOMO just listening to all of the different places you've been to. So it sounds like this was really fruitful, exciting, energetic, maybe a little bit tiring. But at some point, then you transitioned into becoming the Witch of Wall Street and kind of doing your own thing. What led you to do that?
I know. I mean, it was a moment, it was quite a distinct moment actually in that whole journey. I was attending a Women in Finance event in Bloomberg in London, in East London. And honestly, Lauren, up until that point, I was blissfully unaware that women in finance faced any specific challenges. I just had my head down. I don't know, I was somewhere in the sand, despite being one of 8 women in my university class of 60 men. I just never acknowledged the fact that women would have any different challenges in the space of finance until I attended this event. And I remember a woman who was a CEO of an organization called 100 Women in Finance, Amanda Pullinger, standing on stage and sharing, at the current rate of progress, it's going to take about 120 years for women to achieve equality within the financial industry. And it shook me to my core because here I was so blissfully unaware of the challenges that women were facing, including myself, that I wasn't even aware of. And in that moment, I just realized I had to do something. And a big driving factor at the time was, my desire at the time was to have a daughter. And I thought, how could I ever look at my daughter in the face and say, yes, honey, you can go and do anything you want in the world, knowing that wasn't going to be the case. And so that was really a driving force of, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something. And so how that unfolded for me was, starting working with our women's network in my company at the time. I was working at Ernst & Young. I started coaching. I was very passionate about personal development. So I'd been to all the Tony Robbins events and the Bob Proctors and all these personal development seminars. And so I started teaching other women the things that I had been applying to really accelerate my career. And so I was kind of inadvertently coaching women in my industry and my company. And then I started taking on roles, working with our leadership team to see how can we make a real difference for the woman sitting at her desk right now, not just talk about, gender equality or talk about female empowerment, but how do we actually make a difference and really move the needle? And eventually, after about a year or so of doing that and getting different recognitions and awards that came with that, it kind of became very apparent to me that not only was this something that I was very passionate about, it was also an area that I was making a really big difference in too. And as I was coming up on my Saturn return of turning 30, I kind of took a step back and said, well, what do I want the next chapter of my life to really look like? All my 20s had been dedicated to finance, accounting, building that career in corporate finance. And what do I want this next chapter to look like? And I realized that I had my ladder up against the wrong wall and I was climbing the wrong ladder at that stage. And so I took that decision, to the shock of my dad, to leave my corporate career behind and pursue what I was really passionate about, which was female empowerment, which I know is a very social media kind of thrown around term. But for me, that was really, how do I make a difference in the lives of women, specifically looking at freedom, financial empowerment, the ability to pursue to the greatest of your own abilities and express your talents, your gifts into the world. And so it started out initially business coaching, working with women, working very much on the personal development side. And one of the very key apparent things that I became aware of was the lack of financial awareness and education for women. It was something I had taken for granted, given my own education, the people I was surrounded by. Investing was something that just, I presumed everybody kind of knew how to do at that point. And it became very apparent that that wasn't the case. And so, as you can imagine, a couple of moving pieces came together, and ultimately the Witch of Wall Street was born, which is where we support women specifically on financial education, support, community, so that they can get confidence in managing their personal finances, that they can discover how easy and accessible investing can be. And we just remove all the fluff, all the gatekeeping, all the jargon that makes the finance industry and investing and wealth creation just feel so complex and inaccessible for so many.
That is so beautiful. Did you get pushback when you were in corporate America? Was it just harder to make a big dent and make some changes? Because it feels like you were doing such a good job. You're winning awards, you're starting conversations, you're trying to just take the conversation from let's talk about gender, the gender inequality, and to actually doing something. Did you just feel like your hands were tied in corporate America and you couldn't make enough difference, so you had to go off and kind of do it in your own way?
Yeah, there was definitely part of that. I mean, when you're working with big companies, like it's a massive machine. And no matter how influential you are, you're still just a tiny cog in that wheel, right? You're dealing with these ginormous operations that are running regardless of who is steering the boat, right? We see CEOs being replaced, we see management teams be replaced, and the machine keeps moving. So that's the type of structure you're looking to change. And so for me, it kind of came to the point of, there were certainly significant impacts being made and changes were happening, but you only have to sit in enough meetings or like women empowerment meetings where you have a top leader or someone from a management team speaking about how passionate they are, and you know the reality back in the office of how things actually are. And it becomes very disheartening. And so it was one of those things of, okay, we can put all the effort into trying to change this, or we can just build something new. And so that's what I was more passionate about, was actually how can we actually just create something new for women. And supporting women actually initially was around building their own businesses, using their own gifts, because so many women were frustrated that they weren't able to express their full potential, that they were limited in these roles, they were limited in their opportunities. So I was like, okay, well, how can we create new opportunities for you so you can express yourself fully? And that was the kind of, bridging gap from corporate to where we are today, was to address it from that point of view.
I love it. If you can't change the current environment, create your own. You built your own table. And I think that's fantastic. One of the things that's really unique about your approach with helping women is you've mentioned a couple things. You've mentioned Saturn, manifesting, and this intersection between wealth and woo. Can you talk more about that and how you use that as part of your approach?
Yeah, for sure. So wealth and woo is literally everything that we do. It's bridging those two worlds together, which traditionally never meet, right? So the wealth being very much focused on the strategic side of financial freedom. So what are the actual steps you need to take to manage your personal finances, to understand how to invest, understand how the financial markets work? So it's a very strategic, quite a logical approach, but it's a very step-by-step process that you go through. The woo is like the fluid, the fun, and it's the mindset work, the energy work, which typically when you look at the finance industry is never touched on. The reality from my experience from working with so many women around the world and from all my trainings as well is that a success is 80% psychology. So we can show you exactly what to do, but if you don't have the mindset to actually go do it, you're not going to get the results. And it's one of the biggest challenges, especially for women, where the financial industry was never set up to welcome women in, to support women, to make it feel safe or accessible. I realized that actually just to focus on the wealth and the strategic side is actually doing a massive disservice for women, for men too, of course, but given the nature of what I do and who I am, I definitely attract a more female audience. And so focusing on the woo side for us is really focusing on the mindset. How do you understand what your conditioning has been? Up until about the age of 8, all of our beliefs are formed as kids. So whatever that environment looked like for you growing up, what was the money mindset of your parents, of your caregivers? How was money interacted with and spoken about as a child? Because they are likely going to be the beliefs you have today. So if you have a scarcity mindset, or you have some beliefs around money that it's greedy to want money, or all rich people are crooks, or it's unsafe to have abundance or to have too much sitting in your bank account, or we're all going to die at one point, so why save it? Just go spend it. If you have those types of beliefs hanging around, then how successful is it going to be when I say, look, here's how you manage your savings, here's how you build wealth, here's how you invest? There's going to be this massive disconnect. And so by bridging wealth and woo, what we're really focusing on is helping, firstly, getting the structures in place, which almost are like the safety boundaries for women so that they can see the progress happening already. And as we're doing that, really looking at reconditioning, rewiring their mind to become more abundant so that they can see money different, with more neutrality, with understanding what it really is, and analyzing their relationship with money, because it is something we're in relationship with, and ensuring that that's the best it can be for them.
So interesting, especially the comments about you're a product of your environment up until the age of 8 years old. That's the majority rule of your money mindset. So after folks have done the reflecting and they're like, okay, my money mindset is I'm generally a saver. I'm not the YOLO type. I want to make sure that I pinch every penny and I, have this like limited mindset. What strategies do you have for somebody that lives a little bit more in that limited mindset?
I mean, it's such an interesting one because we also work with couples in our money date side of what we do in our work. And it's one of the biggest things. I don't know if it's like opposites attract, but there's always tends to be a spender and a saver. And it's this disconnect where they're like, I can't understand the other person and they can't understand them. And it's why even the work that you're doing as well, it's so important for couples to be having these conversations around money from the get-go. I make sure it always happens myself with my friends and introducing this. In terms of actually rewiring a mindset and shifting it, first the question is, do you want to? So if someone's like a saver and like loves to save every single penny, they may not want to change how they are. So there has to first and foremost be a desire to want to change that. If someone loves to live a very lavish lifestyle and very abundant lifestyle, they may not have a desire to be more prudent. So in those situations, what we'll do is focus probably more on the strategic side to be like, how do we ensure you're set up to be your most financially successful? So if you are a big spender and you don't want to change it, that's okay. But we're going to bring in some of these boundaries for you to ensure that you're at least taking care of your future self, that it's not all going on your next big trip, right? We're taking care of future you. And here's probably more of a strategic approach we're going to take. So for someone who doesn't really want to change, we'll focus more on the strategic side and show them actually how do they practically set their finances up for their best interest in the future. If someone does want to change their mindset and does want to change how they feel about money, how they interact with money, then we have a very set process again that we take them through, even though it's on the woo side of things. And it's called the CREATE process. And so this is a type of a manifestation process that I've developed. It's infused with personal development work and nervous system regulation and a lot of deeper work that happens very much more in like the deeper transformational side. But in a nutshell, it's an acronym, and what it stands for is first getting clarity. So what is that desire? Which again, if there's no desire, we have nothing to work with to change. So getting clear on what actually the desire is for the C. And then recognizing resistance. It's one of the biggest challenges people have when they want to go make a change, especially in the personal development space. Everyone's like, just be positive, just, think good thoughts, just stick a smiley face on it. And you're like, oh, I want to like attract this amount of money, or I want to create this change. And in the back of your mind, your subconscious mind is calling like bullshit on it. So it's like, you don't believe that. Come on, get a grip. Yeah. Right. So it's recognizing the resistance that comes up. Instead of ignoring it, we recognize it, we highlight it, and we go, oh, okay, this is why I've not been able to create this in my reality. This is why I've not been able to attract this in or create this opportunity or go and do the thing I keep saying I want to do, because actually that resistance is a belief that's telling me it's safer not to do it. And every single thing in us is wired to keep us safe. So if I have a resistance to a goal and my inner wiring is like, but it's unsafe, no matter how much motivation I have, I'm not going to go do it. So we have to recognize what is the resistance that comes up. And then the next step, E, we're looking at emotionally releasing it. So we go through processes. Again, it's all nervous system regulation work around things like breath work or EFT tapping. It's soothing our nervous system. We can do mindset rewiring, which is very much based in like neuro-linguistic processing. And it's about rewiring our mindset. That takes a little bit longer because it's like literally building new neural pathways in our brains. Our A is affirming our new reality. And it's where most people jump to, right? They jump to the affirmation, they jump to the mantra, but we need to kind of get the crap out first, the gunk, which is the piece we've just done. And then we go look about affirming this new reality that we want to create. How do you want to be in your life? Whether it's around money or your fitness or anything else, we obviously focus a lot on money and wealth and finances. And then the transformation. So if anybody's in the personal development space, the spiritual space, or manifestation, they'll hear people say, turn up as the version of you that you want to become. But it's only really the last kind of step that we're looking at here. And this is turning up. How do you want to be? How do you want to interact with the world? And you don't have any obligation to be who you were 5 minutes ago. You can make the decision that you're going to do things differently. And that can be done to just tiny micro moments where you catch yourself thinking something or acting a certain way or about to do a certain behavior and say, oh no, I'm going to do things differently. And so not feeling this compulsion to have to be living to a certain identity that we used to have connected to ourselves. And then the final piece is we actually delve into the science. So this is really understanding about how do we normalize things. So the E is equalize. So it stands for normalizing manifestation. A lot of people, I call it woo intentionally because everyone's like, oh, that's so woo woo. It's out there. It's like you're hippie dancing around a circle and fire wearing hemp. But I'm like, I know. And I call myself a witch and people are like, whatever. But it's all about looking at the science of it. So we delve into quantum physics, we delve into the actual, down to the atomic structure of how things are created, understanding how our mind is a machine of energy that can manipulate the physical structure of energy. And so we can better understand when we talk about manifestation, it's not hoping, wishing, it's actually a science that we can use. And so for all of my logical, minded, skeptical witches that come into my world. I'm like, here it is. Now you don't have to be doubtful anymore.
Wow.
So that would be the process I would take someone through then who wants to actually go on and change.
That is incredible. And when people come to you, is it mostly they're like, I have a problem that I need to fix, or I have a goal that I want to achieve? Is it like a little bit of both? What triggers people to knock on your virtual door and say, Laura, help me?
Yeah, it's usually a little bit of both. But most people are driven by pain a lot more than they are by pleasure. So we may have a goal, but if things are really bad, or if you're really after getting to the point of, I am so done with this pattern, I am so fed up and done with having a struggle with my finances or not having things in order the way I want them to be, that tends to drive people more than, oh, it would be really nice to have. Right, instead of the goal. It's usually the pain point drives us more. So it tends to be women who are tired of stressing about money, not knowing how to manage it, not having enough, no idea about investing. Sometimes they've just become a new mother and then they have children. They're like, I want to be able to pass on this wisdom to my kids and actually set them up as well and give them a different experience around money than I've had. So it really varies, but it tends to be, I've had enough of how this reality used to be, and I want to create a new one.
Yeah, absolutely. I can personally attest to that. You just get so fed up and you're like, here we are, insanity again. I'm doing the same thing all over again, expecting different results. So when women are ready to come to you and they're like, okay, I have this issue, where do you even start? I know we address the pain. I know we address like, what is the desire that we're trying to get to, but strategically from an action standpoint, what does that actually look like? Do we walk away and we start journaling? Do we write things down and kind of talk about our atomic habits? What does it actually look like to work with you?
I mean, so the very first thing is setting an intention, which we do with everything we do. But this is like, we do this in an hour. Like, what's your intention? Why are you here? So it's like getting clarity and focus, because it's going to look different for every single person, because it depends where your starting point is. But we need to know where you are and where you want to go, right? It's like any journey we're going to go on in life. It's the same as putting it into Google Maps. But once we have your clarity and your intention and your destination, your desired destination, the first thing that I take every single woman through is a money date. Because here's the thing. For most people, even the practice of opening up their bank account or looking at their credit card statements brings up so much anxiety and fear, or they're like, I can't even look at it. I just know there's kind of money in there and everything's kind of being fine. But actually having to face it and sit down and say, all right, this is the state of my savings, or maybe I don't have any savings. This is the state of my investments, or maybe I don't have any. And this is the state of my debts, my debit card, my credit card, my checking account, all of it. They so often, actually never in my experience, have taken time to sit down and really have that, which can be quite a confronting experience for them. And so we do this in a very supportive environment and we make it fun, right? We call it a money date for a reason. So I have women who, they make a little cacao ceremony, they're burning incense, they put on their favorite playlist, they pour themselves a glass of red wine. I'm like, make this something that's like an act of self-love for you. So this is like your time for personal financial care. You're taking care of you, you're taking care of your future self. See it as an act of self-love. And so by even just changing that mindset around it, it's like it creates more joy in the whole process. It's not like, oh, I have to sit down and now look at my finances. Like, this is going to be stressful. It's like, oh, I get to look at this thing called money that I'm in a relationship with. And now let's figure out, how do we want this relationship to be? Because if we were friends, right, and I didn't check in with you for a year, how good of a friendship would that be? It wouldn't be very good, right? So it's the same with our money. We need to just figure out, how would I describe my current relationship with money? Maybe it's intimate, maybe it's distant, maybe it's complicated, whatever the Facebook status would be.
Yeah.
But it's like, we have to first recognize what's the relationship and how do we want to get it better? And then taking people on a money date as a very, very first step is like the best thing they can do to actually go on that journey.
I love that. Let's dive right in, and we're going to dive in elegantly. We're going to set the mood. We're going to have the candles and the wine. I love it. I think that's beautiful. I've also heard that women traditionally are better investors they're traditionally better with money than their male counterparts. Is that true?
Yeah, the statistics tend to say so. And I mean, we see that as well, even when I was back in corporate, who were like, companies that are run by women tend to perform better. Female investors tend to perform better. The returns are better. And it comes down to, and it's funny because everyone says women are really emotional, right? That we're very emotional beings, which is true to an extent, but actually we're quite rational when it comes to investing. We don't invest off emotion, which we tend to see male investors do quite a lot. And so they tend to do a lot of active investing, and they're buying and they're selling and they're letting the emotions of the financial markets drive their decisions, where women don't tend to do that to the same extent. And so as a result, their returns, their profits tend to be better, marginally, but still better than male investors for that reason.
That's so interesting. So I heard we might have a little shame entering the game, and we may be a little bit behind just based on inflation. So finances were not set up for women. Corporate America wasn't set up for women. But once we enter the game, we're naturally really good at it. So I heard, let's set a money date. Let's call Laura. Let's feel really, really good about our finances and where we're at and just start taking action. So I love that we're just talking about it for women in general. But would you say that there's space? I know it's 120 years till we reach gender equality. Do you think that there's much hope for, let's say, our kids or people that are being born today to really reach that gender equality much sooner?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't be even doing what I'm doing if I still thought 120 years. I'd be like, all right, get me on some spaceship there. I'm just gone. Of course. And I think it really starts with each of us individually. Like, even us having this conversation around money is generation shifting. Like, I was writing my book, which I just released, and a part of it, I was reflecting back on my own personal journey with finances. And I thought, my grandmother could never have imagined investing. It would have been like if I was talking to her about some alien garb, like Gurgan language or something. Like, it would have just been so far from her mind. She didn't even have the opportunity to work once she got married. To have only just 2 generations later, not only her granddaughter as an investor, but teaching women how to invest, like, that's such a massive generation shift. And I think the wisdom and the teachings I can now pass on to my kids versus what I received, and how that's going to put them ahead so much more to even where I was, and setting them up their own investment accounts. So when they're 18 and when they want to go and do life, like, they already have a pot of money that's been working for them for like 18 years. And probably the most valuable thing beyond even that is the mindset. Helping them have a healthy relationship with money, understand what it is, what it isn't, how they manage it, how they respect it, how they make sure that they control money. Money never controls them or their emotions. So those things that we can do individually for ourselves, and if we pass it on to our children, to nieces, nephews, those around us, that is going to close the gap so dramatically. And when I say the gap, I don't even really look at the whole male-female gender gap anymore, because I'm like, there's so many gaps there existing. Let's just focus on where we want to get to. It's never going to become a one or the other side, But I think just closing the distance to where we want to get to as well is definitely within our reach. But it is about personal responsibility, and how do we want to make a change in our own lives first.
I love that. I heard keep your blinders on and just stay focused on where you want to go. Don't worry about the gaps. There's so much going on. You're so right. We can't point blame while we're trying to reach our goals. Let's just stay focused.
100%.
We talked a little bit about couples, and I know you specialize in helping women, but what advice do you have for couples? Especially, I know when there's the two different money mindsets and reaching some of those goals, like retirement or buying a house, saving for kids, all those fun things.
Yeah, I mean, when we take our women through their money date and the very beginning of their journey with us, like, their partners are very much a part of that. Like, I hear about their relationships, and it's a safe space where everyone can open up and talk about it, because the reality is that most couples, at least that have come into my world, whether they've been married for 10 years or whether they're a new couple, finances isn't something that they have been openly, freely, happily discussing. It's either been something that they completely avoid. If it has ever been brought up, it brings up a lot of anxiety or arguments, or it's something that's just completely ignored. And so what we do is initially women will go through their own personal money date, but it's actually about having a money date with their partner as well. And I totally understand the resistance that that brings up. And it happens for almost every single woman that goes about this. They're like, okay, I now need to sit down with my partner and get them on board about having a discussion about money together. And from experience, sometimes that leads to an evening of there might be tears, there might be some intensity around that whole conversation, but without fail, every single woman who's gone through that with their partner has come back and said it's made our relationship better, because all of this was just under the carpet anyway. We've just pulled back the carpet. Yeah, it was a bit uncomfortable. Yeah, it brought up emotions. It brought up accountability that I didn't want to have to face. It forced us to look at where we're spending our money and maybe make some hard decisions. But ultimately, it's actually brought us closer because now there's more transparency. We trust each other more. We're on the same page. It's not now just in the back of our minds thinking it. Now it's all being said, and it might not be the nicest thing to do for your evening. And I'm sure many people would rather avoid it. But once it's done, it's brought them so much closer together. So even if it's something you're thinking of doing and it's like, oh, I don't want the argument, I don't want the animosity that's going to come with it, just remember it's actually something you're going to do to strengthen your relationship afterwards. Like, it is going to be something that's adding to you as a couple. It's a gift to your relationship.
What advice do you have for someone that wants to discuss finances with their partner, but they know it's going to be potentially triggering and an emotional evening, even though it's set up as a money date? What advice do you have to bring up the question of, hey, babe, I want to talk about finances with you?
I tell my witches use me as their excuse. Like, use the fact that you're in this Witch of Wall Street and you're like, I know this might sound weird, but this woman, like Laura, this witchy woman, she's like, maybe this might be a good idea. And I don't know, would you be open to it? Like, it's just part of the coursework I have to do. And so you don't have to go in and make this like this big thing of like, right, we need to sit down and do our finances together. It can be done in quite a fun way and being like, hey, like, can we just spend a bit of time together and doing this coursework? I'd love your help with it. I'm trying to understand things. Like, can we do this as a couple? Like, I'd love to be able to do this together. So it's not just me on my own individual journey. And of course, every person's going to approach that differently based on what their unique relationship is. But all my witches have very happily used me as their excuse, which I'm very happy for them to do, and use that as the bridge to be like, hey, can we talk about this? You know, it doesn't have to be this big event that happens. It's just like, oh yeah, let's just sit down and have a chat and take it as step one.
I love that. And who knows, if you're thinking about your finances, your partner might also be too, and they might want to approach the topic and they might have anxiety about bringing it up too. So I always think about, maybe I'll be the one to create the space, because you never know, they may want to discuss these things too.
100%. And look, the reality is that the traditional roles, that it's interesting that so often women are fighting against, of like, you know, men being the breadwinner and all of this. Men on the flip side also have that conditioning, for the most part, that I've seen, where they also feel a sense of responsibility and that financial burden of being the provider. And so some witches have shared back to me, some of the women I've worked with, about like, they were just feeling all this pressure and stress to keep everything together. And I wasn't even aware of it. And now that actually being able to sit down, we've been able to share that burden together. And now he doesn't feel like it's all on him. So it's actually quite a two-way street. So exactly as you said, you know, it's there whether it's been spoken about or not. Like, we're all feeling a certain way about money. So unless we're talking about it, we don't understand how the other person's feeling either. And, you know, it could avoid something much bigger down the road where, you know, it becomes a real big issue. So better to address it now and see how you can lovingly support each other moving forward.
For the women who feel like, oh my gosh, I have nothing, I don't even know where to begin, I want to start investing, but I just don't feel confident in it, or I want to start reaching those goals. What is the first thing you'd advise them to do?
I mean, the first thing is to take the pressure off themselves. Like I talk a lot about the history of women and money, not to go back and do a woe me type of scenario, but just to realize, look, it wasn't until the 60s, 70s, women were able to get access to bank accounts in their names. There's been a lot of interesting things happen in our history where women just weren't given access to financial products. So likely our moms weren't able to get access to these things. It just wasn't really passed down to us. So it's just understanding a little bit about the context in which we're approaching our finances and feel like, because sometimes women can feel like, oh, it's just me. I'm just bad with money. I'm bad with finances. And they hold this shame, this guilt, and this kind of like self-deprecation of themselves because they're not so-called better with money. So I only bring up the history just to say, give yourself a break. It was never set up that you were meant to be any other way with money. So unless it was imparted by your parents, your family, or somehow in your school system, which certainly wasn't for me, how could things be different? Okay, it couldn't have been different. So just firstly, give yourself a break, because having shame or any negativity towards yourself around money doesn't help anything feel better. That's the first step. Second thing is that money date. I will talk about it all the time because it is so transformational. And we have free templates available if people want to access those to download, and just takes them through the whole process of, okay, what am I looking at on my money date? And it's just going through all of your accounts, getting familiar with it. And even if on your first money date, all you do is open it up and look at your balances and figure out if you have debt, what the interest rate is, awesome. You already nailed it on your first date. You've actually done the hard thing. And then when it comes to actually investing, one of the things that so often women can't get their head around is how easy it can be. And I was just having this conversation recently about, for some reason, we all think everything has to be harder than it actually is. And that's the same with our fitness, with our financial fitness, with life, with everything. Because if it was that easy, wouldn't everyone be doing it? That's the mindset that comes up. And it is that easy, but no one was told how to do it, is actually the truth. And so when it comes to investing, the thing I always say is step one is invest in your financial education. Please don't just start listening to some random Reddit thread, or you listen to one podcast and got a hot tip of a stock and you decide to put your money in. Just understand what you're doing, because you're going to be in a relationship with money for the rest of your life. Your investments are for the rest of your life. It's not just for the next 2 months to make some quick money. So take the time to really understand what you're investing in. I just promise you, it's going to save you time. It's going to save you unnecessary losses, and it's just going to set you up for success. We obviously teach people how to invest. We go through the whole thing in a very simplified way. But thankfully nowadays, there's tons of amazing teachers, who are teaching this. So find someone that you resonate with, that you trust, that has the qualifications and actually has the verified, they can show you the proper way to do it. And if they do, then, move ahead, invest in your education, and actually then go and take the action while you're doing some mindset reset work, because otherwise you're going to know what to do, but you're not going to do it.
I love that. Back to square one. Okay. So leaning more into the woo side of Wealth and Woo, how much does our astrology play into our financial mindset? What do you think?
I mean, this is a really interesting one. So on my social media page, I have I have an astrologer who will post things with me. We shall collaborate and post with me to share about what's happening with the planets and how it might be impacting things. So, I mean, up until a couple of years ago, I was definitely super skeptical on the astrology side of things. I was like, who's reading this in the back of the newspaper? Seriously, some planets going to be impacting things? Give me a break. This is my accounting hat on, sitting on the board of a company. But more recently, I've definitely become much more intrigued by the world of astrology and financial astrology, especially. And I think as a woman, there's just something very inherent that we know. Look, if the moon can play such a big impact in our monthly cycle, it's not that far-fetched to think that the planets are doing something, right? I don't know if it's the planets I'm going to live my life on, depending on what planet's in retrograde or what's going to happen with a certain thing. But there are definitely certain themes that when I look at my astrology, when I look at my chart, and I'm like, yeah, I can see that playing out. And actually, if that can be used as a guidance for my future, that's really good to know. So I'm certainly not the expert on financial astrology. It's something I find very fascinating, but I leave that to my in-house astrologer to share her insights and wisdom on the side of the planetaries.
That is so cool. And I'm at the place of like, where you're right. Like anything is possible at this point. And if it helps your money mindset and it makes you feel confident in making decisions, it doesn't feel like there's anything wrong with that. As long as we're not just draining our bank accounts, being completely reckless with our goals, I think whatever helps you at the end of the day feel really confident about your choices is important. When it comes to budgeting, we have mixed feelings about budgeting at HelloPrenup because on one hand, it's necessary, right? Like you have to be able to save, you have to be able to have enough money to do the thing. Can you talk about how to not make budgeting not so daunting?
Yes, I have mixed feelings about budgeting too. So I know some women who love their budget. They have an Excel spreadsheet and they stick to it like religiously and it works for them. And I'm like, more power to you. And maybe as a teacher, I should be like, yes, this is how we should do it. But I personally find it so boring. And the only thing a budget has ever done for me is I've created a budget, finished it, closed my laptop and forgot about it. Like that
exactly.
And the budgeting process, I just don't find it helpful. I feel like it's a static thing that I have on my laptop and then I go live my life. So what I find is a much more helpful practice is the 50-30-20 rule. So listeners may have heard about this before, maybe not, but it's a much simpler, more flexible approach to managing your money. And you put it into different buckets. We put it into different cauldrons, of course. But you put it into the 3 different buckets. And so we have 50% is your necessities. This is like your rent, utilities, insurance, anything that's like a must pay. Like if I don't pay this, there's going to be serious repercussions, right? This is a necessity. No, my manicures are not fitting into the necessity bucket. But it's all your like essentials for the month or throughout your year. Your 30% then is current day you. And again, this is a flexible number, but you're looking at about 30% on if you want to, I don't know, get your hair done, your nails, whatever you're doing for you, go to that concert, eat out. Maybe you're putting some money away for this holiday that's coming up. And whatever it is, it's current day you to live your life, because as much as we want to get to our older years with a bank full of money, we also want to get there with a memory bank that's full as well, right? So it's that balance. And then we put 20% towards our future self. So this is taking care of future us down the road. And this is where we work through this priority list of setting up your savings first and then setting up your investments. And so we're setting aside our money towards our future you. Now, for me, that's a much more flexible approach. And so depending on an individual, like if you're someone who's like, no, I'm really committed to achieving my financial goal within the next 6 months, then that 30% on current day you might come down to 10%. They might be like, you know what, I'm actually going to cut back on everything and I'm going to redivert a whole lot of that over to my future fund because I want to achieve my savings goal or my investment goal faster. But at least you have a structure. You know, if your like necessities are 70%, that needs to be brought down. You need to readjust things. Or if your current day you is like 50% and future you is getting 0, it's like, all right, maybe that spender in that case might be like, okay, maybe I need to rein things in and think about future me. Maybe the person who's like scrimping every penny can see that and go, actually, I'm not giving me any experiences. I'm not even enjoying my day to day because I'm so fixated on making sure I'm saving for my future. So maybe that might help them understand, hey, we need a memory bank too. We need to fill up our cup and enjoy life as we go through the journey too. So the 50-30-20 approach is much more flexible and it's much more simple to implement, to stick to. And just to say this as well, when you first go and you look at your finances, don't be shocked if it's not fitting into the 50-30-20. It's okay. You can say, here's where I'm at. Maybe it's 70-30 right now. And you're going to go about adjusting it. And you can say, okay, well, what's my first thing I need to do? And that might be, you know, and this is where maybe some hard conversations come in of like, all right, am I living in a place where really I can't be affording this rent? Or do I need to start ringing up and renegotiating some of my utility bills? or if that 30% bucket is like off the charts, it's like, all right, maybe we don't need to go and eat at Nobu every week, or maybe we need to cut back on certain things. And understanding from that point of view doesn't feel like lack. It doesn't feel like limitation. It feels like, oh no, this is forward progress. I'm moving towards my goal. So I don't mind rediverting money now, because I'm not like, oh, I can't have it. I'm choosing to spend my money differently. So it shifts your mindset as well from like the typical budget, which is I can't go do it. It's like, no, I'm choosing to do it differently now. And so I just find the whole approach much more beneficial.
I love your approach too, because you're not a slave to the budget. Your mindset is about being in control. I'm choosing to do this for my desires and needs and goals that I want to hit. Also, instead of calling them buckets, call them cauldrons, because that just makes it way more fun. And I think bonus points for dressing up as a witch when you do your budgeting. I don't know. That's what I took away.
Send
It
me a
sounds a lot more
photo.
fun.
Oh my God, if anyone does that, please send me the photo. I would love it.
I think we need to have a money date dressed as witches, and we put our money in cauldrons. Each sheet on Excel is a cauldron. I see it beautifully. I'm excited to do it.
I'm here for it, Lauren.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Laura. I'm completely inspired. I need to have some hard conversations with myself, and I know the audience is thinking the same thing. So thank you for being you, and thank you for all of the work that you're doing, because I think we need a billion more Lauras to close that 120 gap, and I think we can help make the change. Laura, where can people find more of you?
So on social media, you'll find me The Witch of Wall Street on all the platforms, or my website is lauratynan.com is probably where you're going to get everything.
Amazing. And her social, you guys, is incredible. Yes, the astrology content is to die for, but all of her content is really juicy. And we at HelloPrenup ingest it all the time. So thank you so much, Laura, for being you and all the work that you're doing. Also, her book is incredible. What is your book called?
Oh, well, very originally named The Witch of Wall Street. So The Witch of Wall Street is a step-by-step guide to personal finance mastery and confident investing for women.
Amazing. And yeah, make it The Witch of Wall Street. Put your flag on the moon. I love it. Thank you so much, Laura. We're so excited that we got to chat with you. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thanks, Lauren.